Welcome back to another edition of VADA Live. I'm your host, Dan Carrigan. Well, today we're joined by Steve Greenfield, who's a general partner at Automotive Ventures. And Steve, we're here to talk about really what is hot right now, the current market, what dealers need to know about trends, we'll say, tariffs and tech. It's a little tough to say off the top, Steve, but anyway, that's what we're diving into here. Welcome to VADA Live.
Dan, it's always good to catch up. Thanks for having me.
Pulse check, Steve, if we can start right there. I mean, what are you seeing in the market right now? How are the economic headlines impacting everything? Let's just dive right in.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of uncertainty. At the start of the year, dealers were very, very optimistic. Now there's definitely more of a tone of caution. We're worried about the consumer. It all starts with the consumer. And will consumers start to slow down for the remainder of the year? Many of the economists are speculating there could be between a $1.5 to $3 million reduction in the sales rate for new vehicles. That will cascade to used vehicles. Who knows? It's still early in the year. I think we're all still optimistic and keeping our fingers crossed, but it looks like there may be some headwinds in terms of the automotive industry for the remainder of the year.
And I wanted to dive into something too right off the top. What should dealers watch out for in terms of buying habits over the next few months? I know there have been some fluctuation there, maybe perhaps a spike even as recent as a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this, right, leading up to the end of the quarter, where we had a lot of folks in anticipation of higher tariffs and what the impact that might have on new vehicles, getting ahead of it. And we had, a record month with a record SAR back in March. I think, we're pulling ahead demand effectively, right? So even in a normal market, when you pull ahead demand, the rest of the year could potentially be softer. And then you have potentially a higher interest rate environment, higher MSRPs, a shortage of used cars, potentially coming back within the auctions for various reasons. So, it could impact used vehicle prices pretty strongly as well. And, the combination of folks living in a higher, inflation environment, interest rates going up, and having a shortage of vehicles that are affordable could be a confluence of things, which just, has consumers hesitate, and hesitation is not good. And that might mean that we sort of slow down the sales rate on both new and used.
And with tariffs, trade tension in the news, it's almost omnipresent now. This is more of a messaging question. And anything from your side, knowing what you know, and you should suggest for dealers to frame this to customers and staff. Any help there from your side?
Well, the great thing is that, consumers won't be surprised. So you may have to bear the brunt of being the messenger of bad news if a particular model's, MSRP has gone up since the last time they looked at it, affordability challenges, et cetera. But I think dealers have dealt with this over the ages, but specifically since COVID. Consumers that bought during COVID, who bought, vehicles above MSRP are now back in the market. Often they're surprised that they're underwater on their vehicle. Interest rates have increased at the same time, and we've had MSRP inflation. So dealers have had to coach consumers off the edge anyway as they're getting back into the market. So this is nothing new. But I think the good thing is that it's top of mind for consumers in general. So as you're communicating it, just be transparent and, communicate that your automaker may be building vehicles or have parts outside of the U.S. Everyone knows in the news cycle about tariffs right now. So I don't think it's going to be a shock to consumers. I think transparency and the openness is probably the best policy with consumers. And I think you're going to get a lot of nodding from consumers that they appreciate that and that they can understand, because they're seeing this not only across automotive, but across other areas of their life and their pocketbook.
That's a great way to contextualize that, Steve, too. We're not operating in a vacuum in a way that this is part of what the greater consumer knows, understands, and in many ways, auto is a really interesting part of that. For those who haven't lost sight of EVs amid all of this, anything from your side on what that may look like, what's top of mind, I guess, or should be from a market strategy standpoint?
Well, luckily enough, the consumer-facing tax incentives for EVs, both new and used, have held so far. I don't suspect that they'll hold for the remainder of the year, so we're kind of waiting for that news to hit at some point. So for the time being, those consumers that want to buy EVs, there is still a little bit of stimulus. I think the breakaway success has been these hybrids, right? Non-plug-in hybrids. Toyota has emerged from all of this, as looking like the smartest, individual in the room, because they made bets a decade ago or more on the mild hybrids and non-plug-in hybrids. But that's the breakaway conversation for consumers. I think, listen, consumers, especially as times are tighter and they're more focused on their budget, they're going to be looking at fuel efficiency. And if you can sell to them a hybrid that doesn't have to have a plug, but is more fuel efficient, and they're at the gas station less, I mean that's going to resonate with consumers. And nowadays, it used to be a sacrifice with hybrids. It used to be making a big trade-off in terms of power and performance, et cetera. Now these hybrids, these non-plug-in hybrids, perform very well. And the nice thing from a dealer, 3-4 years ago, Dan, we would have been on here really worried that with EVs, the dealer was going to see that consumer much less frequently in their shop for maintenance. And now with a hybrid, you're effectively doubling the complexity of the drivetrain, right? You've got the battery and you've got the ICE engine. So you're going to see these consumers regularly for maintenance, which I think is a really good sign for dealers overall, that EVs haven't been adopted as quickly as some had originally thought.
Is there anything related to trends, tariffs, tech? We'll look at that whole genre now, if you will, Steve. Is there something from your side people aren't asking or really thinking about right now that may be overlooked with that? What's really top of mind? You're like, okay, we should maybe be mentioning this more, and this isn't coming up as often as it should, perhaps.
Well, I mean, it's no surprise. I sound like a broken record, but I think the dealers need to continue to look at costs. Again, their cost structure every month and scrutinize its other vendor spend or employee spend, et cetera. I think that we came off the sugar high in 2022 with this COVID fueled, profitability for dealers. And we're coming back down to what looks like more normal pre-COVID levels. Luckily, the average dealer is still performing much higher from a profit standpoint than they were pre-COVID. But, the dealers have to scrutinize every cost now and, work with their vendors to make sure that they're getting everything, all the value that they can out of every dollar they're spending with their vendors. Look at employees and look at retention and training. Also look at ways they can start automating processes to make their employees more efficient, to enable their employees to do more with less resources. And at the end of the day, for every dollar that you're able to save on your monthly costs, that's one more dollar of profitability. And it also builds more resiliency and buffer in your system, right? So, I mean, if for whatever reason your automaker is getting squeezed from tariffs and MSRP is going up, and you have a sort of a shortfall in terms of new car sales as a result, then you can reallocate elsewhere if you've been really prudent with looking at your cost structure.
You have written and spoken about the dealership of the future. To that end, what should dealers be doing now to prepare and position themselves for what's coming?
Yeah, so I think there's controllables and uncontrollables, right? What you can't control is the product that your OEM is going to provide for you for a new vehicles and what the tariff impacts are going to be for these OEMs. What you can control is used car operations. You can stock used vehicles that aren't necessarily associated with your brand. F&I, right? The back end of the vehicle transaction, making sure your house is in order there and everybody's trained up and you're maximizing your back end gross right now, especially in an environment where there's less regulation than there was in the previous administration. And then you've got your parts and service, right? So parts and service usually delivers more than 50% of a dealer's profitability for their operations. And right now, I mean, really focusing on your vehicles in operation and ensuring you're getting, customer loyalty to come back in and have those vehicles serviced at your store. I would be doubling down in terms of my focus on the controllable areas of the business. Whereas right now on the new car side, there's a lot of uncertainties really driven by affordability and tariffs. And there are things you just can't control in life, right? So dealers are very resilient, great innovators of the business model. And I think focusing on those areas that they can control, as they always do, but really doubling down on these areas where they have more discretion and control over both the revenue and the profitability across different departments within their organization.
In embracing the new, are there any smart ways dealers can engage early stage tech and really just how to even invest in it?
Well, Dan, that's a good softball. I mean, that's the business that we're in. We've got about 80 dealer principals across our three funds that represent about 1,000 rooftops. So you can engage with folks like us that see 70 companies a month. If you're very interested in early stage technologies, either for the benefit of your operations and or to invest in, But I think that, I'm happy to provide my contact information to any dealers out there. As you come across interesting vendors, self-servingly, I'm looking to make investments, but happy to, be a thought partner with you as you're looking at a new vendor that's come out and is making these promises to think through who else is out there that offers something similar, how unique this product is. And also, maybe most importantly, if we have other dealers that are investors with us that have tried the product, we're happy to also share contacts where they can get in contact with dealers that have been using the product to see if it works. But the great thing about this whole ecosystem, all you have to do is walk around NADA to understand it. There's no shortage of innovative entrepreneurs who are focused on building solutions to help dealerships, and so we're always continuously seeing new technologies pop up. But I'm happy to be a thought partner with any dealer out there that wants to ask questions about some new technology they're being pitched.
Is there any question you're receiving just a number of times right now? What are you getting the most at this moment?
Yeah, it's really around AI and what impact, should dealers be paying attention and what impact it might have on their operations. So we're seeing a lot of innovation, for example, in the inbound call area, right? So now you've got a number of different vendors that can be answering phones 24/7. I mean, the light version could be just after hours, but now many dealers are having that bank of automated phone robots effectively answering the phone 24/7. And if they can't deal with the questions, is my car ready? Can I schedule an appointment, et cetera? Then it can transfer it quickly and seamlessly to a human who can take over. But that's the first generation of sort of AI. I think we're about to see like much more complex AI, mining all of your customer records that you ever sold vehicles to, all of your leads, and being very thoughtful and intentional with how these robots are effectively reaching out to consumers, whether it's via a voicemail, whether it's a text or via chat, or what have you, to really nurture leads in ways that, we've always had the promise since the beginning of the internet. We're on the cusp of really advanced AI that we're seeing in other verticals that will come into automotive, and I think really transform a dealer's operations. I think, customer satisfaction will increase dramatically, and you'll be able to augment, the capacity of your existing employees. They'll be able to do a lot more than they were able to do in the past before we even start thinking about a future where we may be able to replace some of the employees with like automated robots as well.
So we were looking forward, maybe take a second to pivot and look back. And as of recording this segment in late April, is there a way you can help us kind of understand, almost contextualize what happened as it relates to just tariffs and the economic climate this week? How do you remember, how are you kind of couching this as to what occurred?
Yeah, I mean, I think the spirit of these tariffs is right. It's coming from the right place, which is, can we get more manufacturing back on American soil and employ Americans? I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. But the challenge is like, how much collateral damage are we willing to inflict on ourselves, and how long will it take, right? Because we know, there was news here earlier this year that Stellantis was going to reactivate one of their plants, an existing plant that they had mothballed, but it was going to take 2 years to get it back up and running, right? So we know anyone who lives in proximity of a plant that has been built from the ground up, you're talking about years and years to get these plants built. And so I think theoretically really sounds great to bring more manufacturing jobs and employment back onto American soil. But we'll see sort of where the right balance is with these automakers. I am certain that we'll see a lot more infrastructure investment over the remainder of the year as a result of these tariffs or the threat of tariffs, and we will see a lot more manufacturing jobs brought back to the U.S. But I think at the same time, I'm very sensitive to like, we can't inflict too much pain on the consumer with increased pricing. Because they will slow down. They will sell fewer new cars, will sell fewer used cars. And we got to keep consumers very confident. And we have to make sure that consumers can afford to both buy vehicles and service their vehicles. So we got to strike the right balance.
And Steve, maybe one final question. What is your overall message to dealers right now?
Well, it's amazing. One of my industry friends is a gentleman named Glenn Mercer that, most of our viewers will probably know quite well. If you don't, highly recommend that you subscribe to Glenn Mercer's content. Very thoughtful. And he does typically every year publish research with NADA. Well, Glenn has shown a slide recently which is amazing, like really amazing, which is he goes back 50 years and looks at the average dealership's profitability before tax and maps out for 50 consecutive years. And it's eerie, except for, COVID, where we had this anomalous jump in profitability. It's hovered in the vicinity of 2 to 3% for 50 years. I don't know that in 1 year in the last 50 years, the average dealer in America has had a negative year from a profitability standpoint. And we've never had a year where it's been over 3%. Now, has the dealer business model evolved tremendously over the last 50 years? Absolutely, absolutely. But I would message to folks that, come good news or bad news, this business model that feeds an industry has been so resilient. Really because of the innovation that's taken place within the business model, within the four walls of the business model. But it's an amazingly resilient business model. I think in my 25 years in the industry, there were like 3 existential threats that dealers were going to go to business and we weren't going to need franchise dealers anymore. So I think, it's emboldened folks to be very aggressive with buying new stores, a lot of private equity coming into the marketplace, et cetera. But I think that if I had to message anything, like you've got to be on your best game, right? Bring your best game to work every single day. But history will tell us that this business model, this franchise dealer business model, has been very resilient and is likely to continue to be very resilient in the future.
What do you think it is about the franchise dealership model that makes it so resilient?
Well, I think it's just the value delivered to the consumer, right? OEMs in the past have tried the direct sale model, sometimes owning physical stores, and it's just been a catastrophe. It hasn't worked out well. What are the automakers good at? They're good at anticipating what consumer demand is going to be for new vehicles, and then getting ahead of that and building the cars with the right configurations to address those needs. They aren't in the business of retailing vehicles. The franchise dealer understands the local market, understands what consumers want in the local market, understands how to build lifetime value with those consumers in the local market in a way that the OEM just can't. I mean, the US is like not one homogenous blob. There are 50 different states, but even within states, things vary so much that the local dealer is attuned with what the local consumers' needs are. And if they're not, they don't survive. So it's very Darwinian, but the dealers understand how to retail and sell and support vehicles in the aftermarket. The OEMs build cars that consumers need. It's a nice symbiotic relationship that has proven out, over the last 50 to 100 years. And I think it's been a testimony to the resiliency and the value that dealers provide because they are enhancing the OEM's product in the minds of the local consumer.
Well, Steve, really appreciate your time. You've been hearing from Steve Greenfield, who is a general partner at Automotive Ventures. We are talking trends, tariffs, and tech. You're watching VADA Live. I'm Dan Carrigan. See you next time.